My name is Sadie Whitmore. I'm 27, and in just 48 hours, I lost everything I thought was holding my life together. It started with an email, a cold 3-line message from my boss at Canyon Leaf Adventures, an ecotourism startup I'd poured 3 years of my life into. Sadie, due to budget restructuring, your position is terminated effective immediately. HR will be in touch. No phone call. No thank you. Just gone. I stared at my laptop screen in my tiny Salt Lake City apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked moving boxes I'd never gotten around to dealing with. Rent was due in 10 days. My emergency savings? $312. And job listings in my field had dried up like the Arizona desert. I did what felt logical. I packed a weekend bag, tossed it in my Subaru, and made the 2-hour drive south to Flagstaff, to the house I grew up in. I didn't even call ahead. I just went. Mom always said, no matter what, our doors are open. And maybe, for once, I believed her. I pulled into the gravel driveway just before sunset. The pine trees swayed gently behind the house, and the golden hour made the old Whitmore home glow like a postcard. Nothing had changed. Same rocking chair on the porch, same hummingbird feeder, same ceramic cross nailed to the front door. I grabbed my bag and walked up the steps, slipped my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I frowned, tried again. No give, maybe it was jammed. Flagstaff winters are brutal. Locks freeze. I walked around to the kitchen door, still nothing. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. Something wasn't right. I pulled out my phone to call my mom, but before I could hit dial, a notification pinged. A new message from her. Sadie, we've changed the locks. You need to learn responsibility. You're not welcome here anymore. Your things will be available for pickup Saturday between 2 to 5 p.m. That was it. No explanation, no concern, just exile. I stood there on the back porch, bag at my feet, phone in hand, unable to breathe. She had actually done it. My own mother. The same woman who once sewed my Halloween costumes and taught Sunday school. I typed back with shaking hands. Wow, brave move. Ha ha. The ha ha was a defense mechanism, like laughing while drowning. I tried calling. Voicemail. Again, voicemail. I tried Dad. Straight to voicemail. I stood outside the house I lived in for 18 years and realized I was homeless, jobless, alone. Inside those locked doors were my clothes, my laptop, my work portfolio, even my passport. I couldn't feel my hands. Suddenly, a voice behind me. Sadie, honey, is everything all right? It was Mrs. Dalton, our neighbor for over 2 decades. She looked at me with concerned eyes and a gardening trowel still in hand. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Then finally, They locked me out. Her expression shifted instantly, fury, then pity. Oh, sweetheart, that's not right. Do you have somewhere to go? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I did. She patted my arm gently. You come by if you need anything. Your grandma Eleanor would never have allowed this. The mention of my grandmother made my throat tighten. Grandma Eleanor. The only person who ever told me, you don't have to earn your place in this family. She passed 3 years ago, but somehow, it felt like she was the only one still on my side. What I didn't know, standing there in the Arizona dusk, was that Grandma had one last card to play, and it would change everything. Before I tell you how everything unraveled, you need to understand where I came from. I grew up in the shadow of a wooden cross nailed above every doorway in a house where obedience was expected and questions were discouraged. The Whitmore household looked idyllic from the outside, tucked along the forest edge in Flagstaff, white siding, wraparound porch, wind chimes singing in the mountain breeze. But inside it was more doctrine than dialogue. My father, Nathaniel Whitmore, was a retired Air Force chaplain turned small-town pastor. My mother, Delilah, ran the home with the precision of a military wife turned Sunday school teacher. Our family motto might as well have been, God first, reputation second, emotion never. Every morning started with scripture. Breakfasts were silent unless they involved prayer or logistical instructions. And every misstep, an untucked shirt, a missed chore, a sarcastic remark, was met with either a Bible verse or a disappointed sigh. I learned early that being good meant being quiet, agreeable, and most importantly, invisible. My older brother Caleb thrived under this system. He followed every rule, served as church youth leader, and went to West Point. He was the pride of the family, the prodigal son without ever having left. I, on the other hand, was born with questions on my lips and fire in my chest. Why can't I wear jeans to youth group? Why do only boys get to lead Bible study? Why does submission sound so much like silencing? These questions didn't make me brave in our household, they made me dangerous. By high school, I learned to rebel in whispers. I joined drama club without telling my parents. I read banned books under my bed covers with a flashlight. I created an anonymous blog under a pseudonym, Grace Under Fire, where I wrote about growing up under spiritual suffocation. But the moment that changed everything came the summer before my senior year. Our church community had arranged a marriage between me and one of the deacon's sons, Lucas Caldwell, polite, pale, deeply devout. I was 17. I told my parents I wouldn't do it, that I wanted to go to college, get a job, live on my own. My father's face turned to stone. My mother cried like I'd died. That night, I overheard them arguing in the kitchen. She needs structure. She's fallen under worldly influence. We can't let her become like her Aunt Meredith. Aunt Meredith, my mother's estranged sister who'd left the church, moved to Portland and dyed her hair blue. It was the ultimate insult. After that, I knew my place in the family had changed permanently. I was still part of it, but in quotation marks. After graduation, I took my partial scholarship and moved to Salt Lake City to study communications. My father told the congregation I was pursuing ministry-adjacent studies. My mother stopped sending care packages by sophomore year. Only Grandma Eleanor stayed in touch. Every month, a handwritten card. Sometimes a $50 bill tucked inside. Her notes were short but full of light. Keep questioning, darling. You're not wrong for wanting more. She was my lighthouse in a sea of guilt and silence. When she passed, no one asked if I wanted to speak at her funeral. The eulogy was all about how faithfully she served her family and the church. No mention of how she once taught me to build a campfire or slipped me novels she wasn't supposed to own. By the time I lost my job and drove back to Flagstaff, I thought, maybe, just maybe, enough time had passed to bridge the gap. I was wrong. By the time I turned 22, the expectations were clear. Marry young, settle down, raise babies, and stay obedient. Lucas Caldwell had returned from his mission in South Dakota and was now managing his father's hardware store. He wore polos tucked into khakis, never raised his voice, and said, "God bless," after every sentence. To my parents, he was the dream match. To me, he was the last lock on a cage I had spent years trying to open. The pressure was subtle at first. My mother started dropping hints during dinner. "Lucas asked about you at church. He said he loved your smile." My father would leave pamphlets on God-centered marriages on my nightstand. Then came the dinner. One night, Lucas joined us for a Sunday meal. Midway through mashed potatoes and small talk, my father cleared his throat. "Lucas and I have been talking. We think it's time you considered settling down. The church would support it." "Your mother and I certainly would." I stared at my plate, my appetite gone, then slowly looked up. "I'm not marrying Lucas." The room went silent. My mother blinked. Lucas shifted awkwardly. My father's face darkened. "You're 22, Sadie. You've had your fun in the city. It's time to stop running." I'm not running, I said calmly. I'm building. A job opportunity had come up in Salt Lake City. A small PR firm focused on ecotourism had offered me a position. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I've accepted a job. I'm moving next week. That was the bombshell. The moment I knew I'd crossed the line that couldn't be uncrossed. My mother burst into tears. My father pushed back from the table, stone-faced. If you walk away from this family, from our values, we won't follow you. I'm not asking you to, I whispered. Lucas stood, murmured a polite "God bless," and practically ran out the door. I left that same night, packed a duffel, drove north in the dark, heart pounding like I'd robbed a bank. Over the next 5 years, I built a life piece by piece, small apartment, ramen noodles, learning to file taxes alone, crying over rejections, celebrating tiny wins. My parents stopped calling. My brother only reached out on holidays. Only Grandma Eleanor stayed tethered to me. Letters. Birthday cards. One Christmas, she mailed me a charm bracelet with a single charm, a compass, to help you stay true when others try to steer. She never criticized me, never asked when I was coming back to the fold. She just reminded me gently and steadily that I was allowed to want more. Then, 3 years ago, she passed. Heart failure. Quick and cruel. I found out through a church bulletin email, not a phone call. Not even a text. I drove down for the funeral. My father spoke for 12 minutes. Not once did he mention her kindness, just her service to the church and family. No one asked me to speak. Afterwards, my mother hugged me stiff as wood. She loved you in her own way, she said. I wanted to scream. She loved me in every way. But I stayed silent. And when I returned to Salt Lake, I vowed I wouldn't go back. Not until the day I had no other choice. Not until the day I lost my job and thought maybe, just maybe, home was still home. I had no idea what that return would cost me. I arrived back in Flagstaff late on a Thursday afternoon, dust settling on my windshield as I pulled into the familiar gravel driveway. I hadn't been home in over a year, not since the funeral. The house looked the same, neat flower beds, wind chimes on the porch, and my dad's beat-up truck in its usual spot. You'd never guess that a Cold War had been brewing inside these walls for years. Mom opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been watching from the window. "Sadie," she said too brightly, "we were starting to wonder if you'd gotten lost." She pulled me into a stiff side hug. My father stood behind her, arms crossed, a nod replacing any form of welcome. "You can stay in the guest room, Caleb's old room," he said. "We cleared it out last night." I nodded, clutching my weekend bag like a child on her first sleepover. "Just for a few weeks," I reminded them, "until I find work again." They didn't answer. The first red flag came at dinner. "Phone's off at the table," Mom announced, "and we say grace together." Fine, I could manage that. But then came the printed chore chart taped to the fridge. Monday, clean bathroom. Tuesday, vacuum upstairs. Wednesday, meal prep. "We believe structure helps create clarity," Dad said, as if quoting a sermon. They even reinstated curfew. "Doors locked at 10. Please be in by then." I was 27. I gritted my teeth and said nothing, figuring I could tolerate it for a few weeks. But the worst part wasn't the rules, it was the commentary. Every day, subtle jabs chipped away at what was left of my confidence. "You applied to that online marketing job? Seems beneath you. Maybe you should consider coming back to the community. You know, something more stable, like church admin work. There's still time to enroll in seminary, you know." Each rejection email I received was met with either smug silence or a pious reminder that God doesn't reward disobedience. They framed it as love, but it felt like a trap. I spent most days in Caleb's room, now stripped of personality and repainted a depressing beige. My laptop balanced on a card table, I fired off job applications while listening to the ticking of the hallway clock. Loud, judgmental, relentless. Occasionally, I'd get freelance offers, writing travel blurbs, ghostwriting corporate blog posts. But when I mentioned them, Dad scoffed. "You can't build a future on side gigs." "You built yours on donations and dogma," I wanted to say, but I didn't. The tension peaked one Wednesday evening. I was reviewing notes for a digital marketing interview, my first real lead in weeks, when my mom knocked. "Can you come to the kitchen? We need to talk." I followed her, heart heavy. Dad sat at the table, arms crossed. Mom paced. "Sadie, we need to know what your long-term plan is," she began. "Find work, move out like we agreed." "It's been 5 weeks, Dad said. "And you've had no serious offers. We're worried you're drifting." I stared at them, stunned. "Do you want me to leave?" "We want you to consider other options," Mom said carefully. "Staying close, building something more grounded. Lucas is still single, you know." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You think I came back to re-enter your system?" "I came because I had no other option." My voice cracked. Tears threatened, but I swallowed them back. "You said your door would always be open." Dad stood, his expression stony. "We didn't say there'd be no expectations." I went back to Caleb's room and cried into the pillow I'd brought from Salt Lake. This wasn't home anymore. Maybe it never was. It happened the night I didn't get the job. I had made it through 4 rounds of interviews for a content strategist position with a sustainability startup in Denver. The final round felt promising. Warm smiles, phrases like, "We're excited about your background." Then, just before dinner, the email came. "We've decided to move forward with another candidate. Thank you for your time." I stared at the screen, heart sinking. It wasn't just the job, it was the lifeline. The escape plan. Gone. I walked into the kitchen, trying to compose myself. My mom was stirring something on the stove. Beef stew, I think. My dad sat at the table with a local paper. I took a breath. I didn't get it. Mom didn't turn around. "Oh, that's too bad." Dad glanced up briefly, then back down. "Well, maybe this is God telling you it's time to reconsider your path." I blinked. "What path?" "Something more stable, something meaningful. Maybe it's time to stop chasing secular nonsense." "It's not nonsense. It's a career." Mom finally turned. "Your grandmother would be heartbroken to see you struggling like this." And that was it. The sentence that burned the fuse. "Don't you dare use Grandma to guilt me." My voice rose before I could control it. "She's the only one who ever believed in me." "That's not fair, Sadie," Mom said sharply. "We've tried everything to help you, but you refuse to grow up." "No," I said, heat rising in my chest. "You've tried to mold me, and when I didn't fit, you called me broken." Dad stood. "Lower your voice. This is still our house." "Exactly, your house, not mine." "Never was." The shouting escalated. Accusations flew like shrapnel. "You're ungrateful. You're manipulative. You're a failure. You never loved me unless I obeyed." Finally, I grabbed my coat, keys, and bag. "I'm going to Allison's. I need space." My mom looked stunned. My dad's jaw clenched. No one stopped me. I slept on Allison's couch that night. She'd just moved into a cozy 1-bedroom near downtown. We drank peppermint tea and watched old rom-coms until I passed out on a pile of throw pillows. The next morning, I had a job interview across town. Nothing fancy, just a marketing assistant role at a local co-op, but it felt like momentum. I texted Mom after the interview, heading back later today. "Can we talk calmly?" No response. I pulled into the driveway around 4:00 p.m. The sun was low, casting long shadows on the porch. I grabbed my key, still in my jacket pocket, slid it into the front door. It didn't turn. Confused, I tried the back door. Same thing, side entrance. Nope, my stomach dropped. I checked my phone. One new message from Mom. We've changed the locks. You're no longer welcome in this home. Your belongings will be boxed and available for pickup Saturday between 2 to 5 p.m. We expect everything to be collected by then. I read it 3 times. It felt like someone had punched me in the chest and stolen my lungs. Everything I owned, my documents, laptop, portfolio, was locked inside. I tried calling, voicemail. Again, nothing. I sat on the porch steps, numb. This wasn't just control, it was exile, and they thought they could get away with it. I didn't know it yet, but someone else had seen this coming, and she had left behind a plan. That night on Allison's couch was the lowest point of my adult life. After she went to bed, I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me, wondering how it had all fallen apart so fast. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was past tears, numb. My parents hadn't just changed the locks. They'd erased me, like I was never part of the family at all. At 2:30 a.m., I opened my banking app, just to see how much I had left in our old joint account. It wasn't much, but it was supposed to be mine. Balance, 0 sounds access, denied. This account is no longer associated with your credentials. I blinked, refreshed. Same result. I called the 24-hour helpline. I'm sorry, the rep said gently. You were listed as a secondary user. The primary account holders removed you yesterday afternoon. There's nothing we can do. That account held my last freelance check. $842, gone. The next morning, I dragged myself to a nearby coffee shop for free Wi-Fi and caffeine. I opened my laptop, a hand-me-down from college, and started applying for literally anything: receptionist, barista, online data entry. Nothing felt real. Not the keyboard under my fingers, not the cup of coffee cooling beside me. Not the fact that my entire life had been packed into cardboard boxes without my consent. I was so focused on form filling that I almost missed the email notification. Subject: Urgent, regarding Eleanor Whitmore Trust. From Sanders Miles Law Firm. I froze. Eleanor Whitmore, my grandmother. Heart racing, I clicked. Dear Ms. Sadie Whitmore, we are reaching out regarding the Eleanor Whitmore Living Trust, for which our firm serves as executor. Recent events have triggered compliance alerts within the trust's oversight system, suggesting a potential breach of beneficiary rights. Per trust terms, you are entitled to immediate consultation regarding your legal options. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Thomas J. Miles Escrillo, senior partner. I read it twice, then a third time. What did that mean? Oversight system? Compliance alerts? My grandmother had created a trust? For me? I clicked the contact link and called the number. A polite voice answered, Sanders Miles, how may I direct your call? Hi? This is Sadie Whitmore. I just received an email regarding my grandmother's trust. A pause. Then, yes, Ms. Whitmore, Mr. Miles is expecting your call. One moment, please. Classical music. My pulse thundered. Then a calm male voice. Miss Whitmore, thank you for reaching out. I imagine this message caught you by surprise. That's putting it mildly. We'd prefer not to discuss sensitive matters over the phone. Are you available to meet in person? I guess so. When? Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Our Phoenix office. Bring any documentation about your current housing situation. I hung up in a daze. Housing situation? I was crashing on a couch with a backpack and a half-charged phone. My actual life, my documents, computer, clothes, were locked in a house I couldn't legally enter. My heart raced. Could this be what it sounded like? Had Grandma Eleanor done something to protect me? Suddenly, I remembered something she once told me. The best safety nets are the ones no one sees until they catch you. I didn't know what that trust included or why this law firm knew so much, but one thing was certain: I wasn't as alone as I thought. The law office sat on the 14th floor of a glass-paneled high-rise in downtown Phoenix. All marble floors and chrome elevators, exactly the kind of place my parents would call worldly with disdain. I arrived 15 minutes early, palms sweating, clothes slightly wrinkled from another night on Allison's couch. The receptionist greeted me with a warm smile. "Ms. Whitmore, Mr. Miles will see you now. Suite 1432. I stepped into the office expecting cold formality. Instead, I found a man in his early 60s, silver-haired, calm-eyed, extending a hand. "Sadie, thank you for coming." He gestured toward a sleek chair across from his massive desk. Everything about the room screamed authority, but not intimidation. It felt safe. "I know this is a difficult time," he began, "so I'll get straight to the point." He slid a thick folder across the desk. "Your grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, established a conditional trust prior to her passing, designed specifically to protect your rights as a beneficiary within the family estate." I blinked. "A trust? For me?" "Yes, quite a complex one, in fact. She anticipated potential challenges from your parents regarding your autonomy." My breath caught. "The house you lived in, the Whitmore property, is legally part of the Eleanor Whitmore Living Trust. Your parents are listed as trustees, but only under the condition that you retain full, unrestricted access to the residence at any time, for any duration." I stared at him. "Wait? Are you saying they violated the trust when they locked me out?" "Precisely. The locks being changed without your consent triggered the trust's internal oversight system. Your grandmother arranged for access monitoring protocols, digital key logs. 3 failed entry attempts within 24 hours generated an alert to our firm." My jaw dropped. Grandma set that up? "She was remarkably forward-thinking," Mr. Miles continued. "Your parents were required to maintain the home not just for themselves, but for you. They've been receiving a monthly stipend from the trust for maintenance and property taxes, contingent on honoring those terms." I felt heat rising to my cheeks. Not embarrassment, but fury. They'd kicked me out of a house that wasn't even fully theirs, while profiting from the arrangement? "So, what happens now?" Mr. Miles opened another folder. "You have several legal options. The most immediate, you may file to enforce your rights as beneficiary, which would require your parents to restore your access within 72 hours. Failure to comply could result in the suspension of their trustee privileges and financial penalties." I swallowed. "What if I don't want to go back?" He nodded gently. "Also, you're right. In that case, we can arrange for the trust to provide alternative housing and reassign financial oversight to a third-party administrator." My head was spinning. For so long, my parents had held all the power, financial, emotional, practical. And now? Now I held the pen. "Did my grandmother ever explain why she did this, Mr. Miles reached into the file once more and handed me a sealed envelope. "She wrote you a letter, 2 months before she passed." My hands shook as I held it. "Take your time reading it, but know this: she believed in you deeply, and she made sure you'd never be left unprotected again." I left the office clutching the folder and the letter like life rafts. Outside, the desert heat hit my skin, but I felt lighter than I had in weeks. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the helpless daughter anymore. I was the rightful heir to my grandmother's faith in me. The following Tuesday at 10 o'clock a.m., I walked into the conference room at Sanders Miles, heart pounding but spine straight. This was it. The table was long and polished. A pitcher of water sat between stacks of neatly printed documents. On one side sat Thomas Miles and a young associate. On the other, my parents and their attorney, Gregory Stanton, who also happened to be an old church friend. When I walked in, my mother flinched. My father didn't even look up. Mr. Miles broke the silence. We're here today to formally address the violation of the Eleanor Whitmore Trust, specifically regarding Ms. Sadie Whitmore's access to the family residence and the use of designated education and housing funds. He spoke calmly, but with steel beneath the words. My father scoffed. This is absurd. Eleanor trusted us with that property. We made decisions as parents, not landlords. With all due respect, Mr. Whitmore, Miles countered, you were not acting as parents in that moment. You were acting as trustees, and trustees are bound by law. He handed copies of the oversight report to everyone. On March 14th, Ms. Whitmore attempted to access the property on 3 separate occasions using her authorized key. All entries were rejected due to changed locks, which is a direct violation of Clause 3A of the trust. Gregory Stanton leaned forward. Surely we can resolve this without legal escalation. This feels like a misunderstanding. I finally spoke. It's not a misunderstanding. You locked me out of my home while I was at a job interview. You refused to answer calls. You emptied my bank account, then told me to come collect my life in boxes. My voice was shaking, but I didn't stop. That house isn't just yours. Grandma made sure of that. And you knew it. My mother's lips trembled. We were trying to protect you from bad choices. No, I said. You were trying to punish me for making choices without your permission. Mr. Miles continued, undeterred. In addition, our audit of the Trust's education fund revealed multiple unauthorized withdrawals over the past 3 years, totaling approximately $121,000. These funds were designated solely for Ms. Whitmore's academic or professional development. He slid forward a breakdown. Dates, amounts, descriptions. Renovations to the backyard patio, $22,000. Kitchen upgrades, $38,000. A new hot tub, $9,200. My father bristled. Those were necessary improvements. We've maintained that home better than anyone. With Sadie's future, I said coldly. The room fell silent. Trevor, my brother, who had quietly joined on video call from DC, finally unmuted. Wait, are you saying you used her college fund to install a spa? My mother looked away. I paid my tuition out of pocket, I added. 3 jobs, student loans, while you were soaking in stolen comfort. Gregory cleared his throat. Again, we're open to settlement. I have a proposal, I said, pulling a folder from my tote. All eyes turned. 1. I want out of that house. The trust will purchase me a separate property in my name using funds that were rightfully mine. 2. A third-party trustee will be appointed to oversee all trust finances going forward. No more unchecked withdrawals. 3. If you want any relationship with me at all, you will agree to attend family therapy, not to fix me, to understand yourselves. Mr. Miles added, failure to comply will result in legal enforcement, removal as trustees, repayment of misused funds, and possible litigation. My father finally looked at me, and for the first time he looked afraid, not of me, but of the truth. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I never meant to hurt you, Sadie. Then why did you? I asked softly. Why did you make me prove I was worth love? Trevor's voice came again. She's right. You've treated her like a guest in her own life. This stops now. Gregory asked for 48 hours to review the proposal. We stood. My mother reached out almost instinctively. I didn't flinch, but I didn't step closer either. Outside, the desert wind blew sharp against my cheeks, but I felt taller, not because I'd won. Because I finally knew I wasn't the problem. They were. And Grandma? She'd seen it all coming. 48 hours after the meeting, Mr. Miles called with the update. "They've accepted your terms," he said simply. "All conditions, no edits." I felt a pressure release in my chest that I didn't know I'd been holding for years. The trust immediately moved forward with purchasing a modest 2-bedroom condo in Sedona, not extravagant but light-filled and quiet, with a view of the Red Rock cliffs my grandmother used to paint in her spare time. I cried the day I walked into that space for the first time. Not because it was big, but because it was mine. No conditions. No expectations. No one standing in a doorway asking if I was making the right choices. Just me, free. The trust also began funding my enrollment into a part-time master's program in digital strategy and brand communications, something I dreamed of for years but never pursued because marketing isn't a real career, as my father once said. I was finally doing it, not because I was trying to prove anything, but because I wanted to. The new third-party trustee assigned to oversee the Whitmore Trust was a sharp woman named Monica Reyes. She now approved all expenditures and required quarterly reports from my parents. According to Mr. Miles, my father nearly choked when she first requested receipts for a church landscaping invoice. They weren't used to being questioned. But that was the point. As part of the agreement, we began family therapy, neutral ground, licensed therapist, video calls every other week. The first session was brutal. My father sat with his arms crossed for most of it, eyes narrowed, speaking only when pressed. My mother cried, openly, endlessly, until the therapist gently interrupted. "Tears are valid, Delilah, but they don't erase the harm caused. I wasn't there to be comforted, I was there to be heard." By the fourth session, something shifted. My mother admitted that she'd learned love through fear, that her own mother, the one I never met, used obedience as currency. "I thought control was how you protect someone," she whispered. "But I see now, it was how I broke you." My father took longer. He still clung to principles and moral structure. But during one session, he said quietly, "I didn't know how to parent a child who asked why, so I punished the questions." It wasn't an apology, but it was the beginning of something else. Meanwhile, I flourished. I picked up freelance work again, now with the confidence of someone who no longer had to beg for approval. I even began mentoring other young women in conservative families, helping them find scholarships, plan escapes, or just believe they weren't crazy for wanting space. Trevor and I grew closer too. For the first time, our conversations didn't orbit around our parents or the church. "You were the only one who ever challenged them," he told me over coffee. I just kept my head down. "You survived the way you had to," I replied. "Now we both get to rewrite things." Mrs. Dalton, the neighbor who had once found me sobbing on the back porch, sent me a basket of lemon scones when I moved. Inside was a note. Eleanor would be so proud, not just for standing up, but for doing it with grace. Some nights I still hear echoes of the old house, of curfews and silence and the word disappointment whispered behind closed doors. But those echoes don't own me anymore. I live in a home with open windows and shelves full of banned books. I light candles without asking permission. I let myself laugh, loud, unfiltered, unbegrudged. And every time I submit a grad school paper or cash a freelance check, I think, this is what freedom sounds like. If you've made it this far, thank you. Because this story, my story, isn't just about family or money or one final letter from a protective grandmother. It's about something bigger. Boundaries. And how sometimes the people who raised you are the very ones who taught you to betray your own instincts. For years, I believed love had to be earned, that being difficult meant being undeserving, that asking why meant being disloyal, that needing help made me weak. But now I know better. Love that has to be bargained for. That's withdrawn the moment you disagree. That's not love. That's control dressed up as concern. And boundaries. They're not walls to push people away. They're fences with gates. Ones you build not to keep people out, but to teach them how to come in. My grandmother understood that. She didn't just protect me with money, she protected me with clarity. She saw how damaging conditional love could be. And she left me the tools to survive it, not to punish anyone, but to finally live on my own terms. So if you've ever been told your dreams are unrealistic, felt smaller every time you walked into your childhood home, worked twice as hard for half the approval, been shut out, emotionally or literally, for not fitting the mold? Let me say this: you are not broken, you are not dramatic, you are not ungrateful. You are just becoming someone they didn't plan for. And that's okay. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that erases who you really are. Not for peace, not for permission, not even for family. Especially not for family. Because the people who love you for real will never ask you to disappear to make them comfortable. So now it's your turn. Have you ever had to break away from family expectations to build a life that's truly yours? Have you had to disappoint people just to finally breathe? Drop your story in the comments, because someone out there, maybe even someone in your shoes, is still waiting for proof that it's possible to walk away and still be whole. And maybe your words will be the bridge that helps them get there. And hey, if this story hit home for you, subscribe and share it. Because sometimes, stories are the safest place we find ourselves before we can find ourselves in real life. Thank you for listening. And remember, you don't need permission to be free. You just need one step and a lock that finally clicks open from the inside.